Okay, welcome back to Allobee Radio. I am so excited to have our guest here today. I know that this is our first guest back for this season, so we're really excited to have Julie, and I will share a little bit more of her right now, and then we're going to dive in and have a great conversation today. So this is Julie DeLucca-Collins. She's the founder and CEO of Go Confidently Services and the host of the popular Casa de Confidence podcast, which I had the pleasure of listening to some episodes before we recorded this, and you definitely need to go check it out. As a business and life strategist coach, Julie helps women business owners launch or grow their businesses, get clients, be productive, and achieve their dreams. Julie helps her clients create simple habits to achieve goals and change lives. Julie is also the best-selling author of the newly released book, Confident You: Simple Habits to Live the Life You've Imagined. So I am so excited to dive in and chat with you, Julie. I know that there's so many things just in your bio that we could dive into and are so relatable to all of our listeners. So thank you so much for being here today, Julie.
Brooke, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I love what you guys do. And thank you for listening to the podcast, because that is like our little baby with my husband. And anytime that someone says, "Oh, I listen," I'm like, "Oh, so proud. I hope you liked it."
Yes, I totally am the same way. Whenever somebody's like, "Oh, I heard Allobee Radio," I'm like, "Oh, you did? You listened?" I know when you send it out into the universe and you're not sure how many people are listening and what they're getting out of it. It's so special to hear that people have tuned in and listened. But yes, no, I love listening to people's podcasts before reading their books. Before I interview, because it just gives you a little insight into who they are and a little bit more to chat about. But I'm really excited to dive in today and talk through several questions and see where the conversation leads us. But I know that you were formerly in education. I actually started my career in education too as a history teacher for secondary ed. So I love whenever that education element comes into impacting our career. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your background and your role that brought you to your career in coaching, and how that kind of started.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for asking this question, and thank you for having me. I very simply knew that I was going to go into some sort of teaching because I come from a family of educators. And although there was a little tug in my heart that talked like, "Oh, I want to do a lot." Like, I don't know, but I not settled, but I went into education and I was in early childhood. I taught at a preschool and then I did pre-K and I loved it. I had a lot of fun. And like many educators early on, those first couple of years, I burnt out. I was exhausted and I needed to make money. I needed to live. And I had not only my education job, but I had a part-time job, which really, like most educators, that tends to happen. And I thought, okay, there's got to be something different. And then the part-time job, I was actually a youth minister at my church. They offered me a full-time position and I became confirmation director and in charge of all of the programming for middle school and high school when it came to religious education. So it gave me a great on-the-job training for being able to create programming, being able to create events and work with parents, train volunteers, etc. So I had that experience. And when I married and moved from Florida to New York, I was recruited by Columbia University. So I was doing some grant writing, some work, and I had done some grant writing when I was in college because my dad worked for a company or an organization that did a lot of work for the Agency of International Development. And they did a lot of grant writing. So I learned grant writing from him and I enjoy it. I can't say that I love it, but I enjoy it. I know how to do it. It's easy. And I was then recruited by a national educational company and I was recruited to come in and use some of the background that I had, retail, education, and work as a center director for a tutoring center that, had multiple centers nationwide. There were several centers in New York area, which is where they're based. And certainly I loved it. I love being able to work with parents. I love being able to train teachers, and all of that for me, was exciting. But the other component that I started to learn is, how to grow and get clients, right? Because we had to have clients, how to be able to then run the ins and outs of my center, although we were part of a larger franchise as a corporate center. We were also given the autonomy to be able to do a lot of the marketing, to be able to do a lot of the work. And that was an exciting time for me. And I went from being assigned the lowest performing center in the franchise system of over 400 to all of a sudden being in the top 5. And I remember, I asked one of the founders of the company, how do I get on stage and get an award for being one of the most performing centers? Because what I saw, it was not so much like, oh my God, the center's making so much money. What I saw is that if this is how many kids that we're servicing, they were going to have a larger impact overall. And I thought, I know I struggled in school, and I would love it if there were all these kids that are struggling in school and we were able to really impact them. And she said, the one recommendation I will make is get to know your community and get to know the principals, the teachers, people who can really know about what you do, how we can help them and support them. And that will change things. And sure enough, that's what happened. By the time I left that center, because I was promoted by the company, I was one of the top 5, but it really came from the relationship building that I had done. And that became a very crucial strategy throughout my career, just relationship building. And again, that's something that my dad, who was in corporate and really was my business mentor for many years, always said, honey, you got to just have great relationships. So I was promoted to, it was sort of like kismet timing, right? Things starts aligning. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But when I got a promotion to go into the training department to help other franchise owners throughout the system, No Child Left Behind was passed. And one of the biggest things is the company as a whole was going to pivot to going from just working with parents and having the offers go to the parent pay market. We were going to pivot into offering the services of tutoring and providing programming in schools. And I went under the wing of the business development VP. And again, because I had the relationships, I had the grant writing experience, and all of that melded together, I worked with him to develop this brand new business line for the company. And he was a great mentor. He really taught me how to be able to do business development. We did grant writing, and the first year we were working with 12 different school districts nationwide. And by the time I left, 8 years into the organization, we were working with over 150 school districts nationwide in 40 states. So I had a firsthand look at expanding, helping new business owners grow their brand, grow their reach, make sure that they were providing services. And I also knew what it took to develop a new company of sorts within a company. I also represented the company at a national stage. I began speaking and also began representing the company in Capitol Hill, giving our opinion on, hey, this law is not great. There's some things. And as a teacher, former teacher, I also had that perspective as well. I was then recruited by a competitor of sorts, and that company did a lot of, in addition to services to schools and private clients, we also did professional development and training for teachers, which I feel is very important. And by the time I grew through the ranks of that company, I was developing all of the programming and training, and I did a lot of coaching. And mostly for me, the reason that I became a coach, selfish reasons, is because I wanted to be able to coach myself. I think that all of us have no matter where we are, we have always room for improvement. And I knew that there were things that I wanted to become a better person. So the cognitive behavioral techniques went in so I can manage my brain, so I can become better. And being a constant student, I am always getting different courses, training, certifications, and now I hold 4 different certifications. But when I was laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, I had already created a 5-year plan. I was going to turn 50, and by 55, I was going to leave the organization that I was with. At that point, I was part of the C-suite, and I oversaw all of our, not only business development, programming, contracting, but development of programs and trainings. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to transition out of corporate and going and helping other women build something, because there's so many women that would always say to me, I wish I could do what you're doing or grow and have a business and feel confident. And I thought, I don't always have it together, or I'm not always perfect. However, I do try to keep showing up. And that's what I wanted to share with women who needed that support. My brain does work in a very interesting way, in which if you have a business, I immediately start to strategize. Oh, you could do this or you could do that. And
Yep.
that's part of, I guess, my charm. But overall, that's how I started. And I knew exactly, for as challenging as it was to be able to move forward from a career that I've enjoyed and I felt that I was quite good at. Mm-hmm. I also knew that this was going to be uncharted waters, but it was fine because I had already intended on moving this way. And now I just, keep showing up. And now I love what I do because I get to work with women and find out how is it that I can support them to build the type of freedom and lifestyle that they want, but they've been afraid of doing because maybe they don't know what does it take to market, or I don't know math, the finances. How do I handle the business finance part? Yeah. So being able to give them some of the tools that I've had from having great mentors and working for great organizations where I learned all of this to, empower them to do what they want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I love your story and background and such a good, I think so many times when, especially women, they're probably asking those questions of, how do I start this? How do I do this? They don't realize that maybe they don't know your whole background and story. And I think that a lot of times that's something that comes up even when I talk to women that are starting businesses is I'm like, hey, I started as a teacher. I actually also did youth work and children's work at churches. And then I ended up working in nonprofit. And so there was a whole lot of step stones that got me to where I am, as well as got you to where you are today. But all of that helped you build those relationships and learn about how businesses work and see how you can best help people. And I love that you started to become a coach because you wanted to coach yourself. I think that's just such an honest representation of what coaching should be, to be, in many ways. But we have to know how to coach others by learning how we coach ourselves in so many ways, which I love that. So thank you for sharing that. And I also think that you said something at the very end where you were talking about just showing up and learning how to show up in different ways, whether it's for your business or for your job that you're currently in. But I think that's the hardest thing everyone struggles with is just how to show up and be confident in showing up. So I think that's really awesome, but thank you for sharing that.
Action, Brooke, gets you traction. And I think that this is the thing that, it's my favorite saying. I don't even know if I heard it, but I keep saying it and I'm taking credit for it. But I think that for me, in the times in which I've been able to be successful is because even when I don't feel I can or know how, I've continued to show up. And I will tell you, even with all of the experience I had starting my own business, I struggled in the beginning because no one gives you a little manual. And well, I've kind of put one together for people now, right? Because I made the mistakes. And we also spent a lot of time doing the wrong things. I spent a good month when I launched my business trying to figure out what colors and fonts I should use for my logo. And, what about my website? I need a website. And I just keep thinking like, is that important? Sure, you should have it. Why not? But really, there's other things that should take precedence.
For sure. That is so true. And I love that. You said it, action gives you traction. We need to like make sure that's in the show notes.
Yeah.
That is a great quote and something to remember. And I always talk to our freelancers and clients too about the fact that every little action gives you that momentum that will continue to snowball and create better traction. Because it's just those little steps that help you to get to where you're going for sure. What is one thing? I know we talked a lot about your career and how it had advanced and how it led to you as a coach. But what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
I think this is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned. And it was one of those lessons you learn in layers. You learn it and you're just like, okay, I got it. And then you're like, nope, I didn't get it yet. I need to do it again. Or you're peeling different, or you're learning it deeper and more defined. The lesson is we're not perfect. And when we are trying to show up as perfect, we create a lot of angst for ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission to fail. And failure is part of the process. Yeah. You're not going to have it all together. You're not going to know 100%. And I think that in my 30s, Brooke, I spent so much time trying to like balance this facade. Like, I got it all together. I'm not struggling. I know it all. Yeah. And you know what? It's okay to say, I'm not sure how to do that, but you know what? I'll figure it out, or I'm going to learn. And if you have a supervisor or a boss, that doesn't appreciate that, then I want you to really consider, what is the value, right? Because a good leader is going to want you to be honest 100%, because then they can provide you with the support. They can provide you with the help you need. And many times we're so afraid of people finding that there's nicks in our little armor, that we have these imperfections. But that's what creates good teamwork as well. For instance, in my company, in our business, my husband is part of the business. Yeah. And thank God I have these imperfections and nicks, because guess who has the ability in those areas? And as business owners, we try to do it all. And we spend a lot of time doing things that we should not be doing, that we should be either outsourcing, or we should really be partnering with someone who that's their zone of genius. Yep. And while you're going to do it and it's going to maybe save you money, it's not really doing it because it's costing you time. Yeah. And that's a larger commodity than money.
Yeah. So true. I think that the hardest thing when you're starting any business at all is the fact that you can't do it all, especially as a female. I mean, I think that we don't want to pay the money because we're not sure, is this really going to work out? Is this really going to be going in the right direction? Should I put money towards it? And instead, a lot of times we burn ourselves into the ground when we're starting businesses, and we just can't continue to get enough action. Or we're taking too much action in the wrong direction. It's not giving us that traction.
Right. Absolutely.
And I joke that I started a company about outsourcing, and I'm the worst person to outsource, but I learned that if I wanted to succeed, that I had to outsource. And it's sometimes the simplest things. Like I was joking with my husband that sometimes it's just as simple as he puts away the freezer packs for the kids' lunches, so I don't forget to put them in the freezer so they're ready for the next day. But like sometimes it's a very little teeny action that needs to be taken off of your plate, but it takes a lot of time throughout the week.
Oh, for sure.
Or throughout, your business, or maybe for your business, it's something as simple as scheduling podcasts or doing research for podcasts and getting that out there. But the visibility that it can bring and the traction that it can bring is really big. So I know we always tell people, and I'm sure as you've been coaching so many women too, is just look at your whole everything and do kind of like a time assessment. What's taking the most time from you? Yep. And what can you offload today without doing anything? Because a lot of it is just
So true.
figuring out, okay, here's all the steps I need to do. Do I trust that person? All of these things. But what could you get rid of today and be done with? And I know that's really important.
Yeah, it's for sure. And I have to say, on a weekly basis, one of the biggest things that I do for my business and just so you know, look, here it is. Here's my little planner thing. And I go through and I categorize the tasks that I have on my calendar. I associate it with a value of a task. So as the CEO for my business, there's things that only I can do. Right? I am the person here in this podcast. Is not my assistant. It's not my husband. It's not my dog. It's me, because that's my task. Whereas creating the graphics that are going to be on my social media and the Canva, that's not me. Or editing my last podcast, that's not me. And it's not that there is less importance in a task, but as a CEO, you are only required to really be doing the things that move you forward, that are income producing, for instance. Right? Speaking to potential clients, networking, that can potentially, grow your reach, grow your partnerships. Can get you clients, whereas, you know what, I am going to do, I'm going to write a course. We can go in the weeds on this, but evaluate your calendar and keep track of what you're doing, because, and I actually, it's funny, I have a client that is here for an intensive for the past 2 days working with me. And that's one of the things that I had her. I said, I want you to evaluate what you're doing with your time. I want you to evaluate, and if it's not on your calendar, or if your calendar is, this is when I'm outreaching, you shouldn't be distracted by your notifications on your phone, because those little things add up.
It does so much. It's like the amount of time that we spend distracted keeps us from growing our businesses in so many ways.
Did you know that for every time you're distracted, it takes 17 minutes for you to go back to the task at hand? So if you are getting a notification from Facebook while you're in the middle of writing an email to someone that you need to connect with, and then you get sidetracked to go into Facebook, it will take you about 17 minutes to come back. So that is a lot of time that we're leaving on the table. And then we wonder, I didn't get everything on my list. No, you didn't, because you're kind of allowing yourself to be sidetracked.
Yeah, I mean, you are. And that context switching is intense. And I think that I've, learned how to context switch better just out of necessity as a business owner sometimes, but it definitely wears you out a lot faster too. It's like when you're in your zone and you're able to keep focus and get stuff done, you get it done a lot faster. So it's going to be more efficient and save your time so you can make more money. But it also just is less stressful and less taxing on your body and your mind. So it can keep you open for other things. I know that we spent a lot of our summer with our kids because we didn't do camps this summer. And it was a lot of context switching at the beginning of the summer. And me and my husband were like, okay, we need a better routine if at all possible. And what we had done during the pandemic when schools were shut is like, I would have the morning, he would have the afternoon, unless like there was some crazy thing going on. And it just allowed us to like be in our zone for like 4 hours and then not have the context switching. And then we would just not do anything else during that afternoon. So we wouldn't be so dead tired by the end of the day. And I always suggest that to people. You get so much work done in 4 hours if you're not context switching. But it's really hard to convince people sometimes to focus on that.
Oh, absolutely. That's so good that you did that. I think that, sometimes, and I have to point out something that is brilliant that you do. Ask for help or partner with your partner. Sometimes we think we have to do it all. And, here's what I was thinking when you said this, that your husband puts the ice packs back in the freezer, right? If that ice pack was not in the freezer and then you're packing lunches and then you realize in the morning that it's like warm, then you're going to have to like plan B. What do I do? Right. And that's
Yep.
taking more time out of your day. But it being able to say, hey, hon, put this in the freezer, and you do that, takes it away from your plate. It doesn't make you less of a mom or caring about your kids' lunches. It's just, but it's giving you time in the back end.
Yes, it is. It's just that time and less stress. Like I'm already focused
Yeah.
on my specific task and need to be in that zone of genius and not anything else. So I know it is. It's so important. Um, well, we've talked a lot about different tips and tricks that we've kind of learned. But oftentimes, I think we don't always talk about some of the challenges that we come up
Mhm.
against as an entrepreneur. So we know that there's things that you had learned in your career that you wish you had known, but what is the biggest challenge that you faced as an entrepreneur? And then how did you overcome it, or what did you learn from it?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that I had, and I think that this is something that it's not unique to me, it's getting clients, right? Like in the very beginning, you're trying to do all the things and people tell you, and everybody's got a solution, right? Everybody's like, okay, do your advertising, do ads, or go live every day.
Yeah.
And many times, so when we have a problem getting clients, I spent a good, you know, I would say I launched my business in March. I like I said, I was working on that logo, that so important logo, for a little bit, and then finally, and I had clients here and there, but my goal was to try to get to the point in which I was replacing my corporate income,
Yeah.
and that meant I needed to get clients. And yes, what is my strategy? But I think that people don't have a clear strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's, today I'm going to try this, or tomorrow I'm going to download that free sheet, or tomorrow I'm going to, talk to this person because I like what they're doing. Maybe that's what I need to do. You're not giving yourself enough time to get traction, so it's like a diet, and I hate the word diet, right? But the same way, like you want to eat in the Mediterranean diet. And then like you start 2 days, and then, tomorrow you're going to go keto. And then the next day you're going to just do the grapefruit diet or whatever. Then what ends up happening is that you're not giving your body, and you're really hurting your business because you're not creating a consistent message. I would say probably in September of 2020 is when I had this huge epiphany. I'm like, hey, maybe you ought to consider running your business like a business. I thought, oh, that's pretty smart. Okay, let me do that. Yeah. And when I really, I had to have a come to Jesus with myself. And like, if you were running this in corporate, what would you be doing? Oh, you wouldn't be just haphazardly showing up, deciding like, oh, what should I do today? What should I work on? You would have a meeting with your team. You would be saying, what are our goals? Where are we with our goal? What are our leading metrics? What are lagging? What's on our calendar? We need to promote. How do we do that? What's our strategy? And creating a strategy for it. Yeah. And that's a lot of what I've turned around and now I help my clients with, because I know that we can be just reactive to the day as opposed to proactively creating and crafting the business we want. And then not being afraid of looking at your numbers. I ask entrepreneurs all the time, so how much income are you bringing in this week? And many of them don't know what's come in for the week, for the month, or what is projected to be coming in as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the thing that, hurts us, because then we don't want to look at it. And if we don't want to look at it, we don't want to do the work, and we don't stay consistent. So create your offers, be consistent. And you know what? Maybe you didn't get that many clients from that first offer. What did you learn when you launched? Go back again and do it again, so that you have enough data to know whether or not that's the right offer. And talk to the people that you're servicing, because many times I had great offers, but I wasn't using the language that people use.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what I offer. I could have been giving them, the solution to their problems, but if they don't, it's not being spoken or in a way that they feel like, okay, that is my problem. Then that's a problem. So that's one of the main issues. And by the time Black Friday came about. I launched a Black Friday offer that was everything else that I'd been doing before.
Yeah.
But then I had more clarity and consistency that I could back up what I was doing.
No, you speak on so many things that I know so many people listening are struggling with or have struggled with, that decision fatigue of just, and that overwhelm of just which direction do I go? There's so many people out there, especially if they're scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or any other place in social media. A lot of people come to Allobee because they have that decision fatigue, time poor, overwhelm, and we curate that for them. And I think that that's something that I saw as both a freelancer and as a business owner, especially in this like micro business solo entrepreneur world, is you want to always stay up to date, but that can be extremely not proactive or like supportive of your business. And I think the biggest things that I did when I started out is one of the first hires I made was a bookkeeper who is still on today because it was essential for me to know my numbers, like you mentioned. And that helped me to really see, where can we put money? Okay, we have more money right now. We can be more visible potentially with, in different directions. But what relationships do we need to build? There's so many things that we can do for free as a business owner too, that I think oftentimes don't get talked about necessarily as much. And also, you started this business, whoever is listening today, and as you too, like, you started your business because you wanted to solve a problem or a pain point for somebody. Oftentimes you experienced that pain point too, and why we need to, help fix it. So sometimes we can just lean into our own intuition and understanding of what we want to do for our business and not chase all the squirrels that are going in all the different directions. I know that that's hard because we want to make money, but I think the one thing that I've learned all the time is if you can put your blinders on and just keep rolling, you'll make more money in the end because it'll be consistent and you'll consistently show up. So yeah, gosh, you shared some great tips with everybody so far today. I have a few more questions. I know that we are getting closer to time, but I want to dive in and ask you, as we've been talking about all of these resources and where we might squirrel off in different directions, but what are the best resources that have helped you along the way?
So I will tell you, very similarly to you, the first thing that I did, and again, my husband is not an entrepreneur by ease. It's not natural to him, but I knew that I needed to hire someone. That's the first resource that I put in place. I remember when I said, "Hey, I'm going to hire an assistant." He's like, "What? What do you mean? We can't do that." But that is an investment that I knew I needed to make in order to be able to then clear my plate and do some of the work that only I could do, like I had talked about. I think that that's one of the resources. The other thing, I did not hire a bookkeeper. We do have an accountant that we work with, but for the business, I actually, that was the second, nope, it was the first purchase I made. I invested into software or a program, right? It's an online program that tracks my money. It allows me to invoice. It allows me to track how much money is coming in. I can log into the dashboard, and Fridays are my financial Fridays, in which in the morning I look at, okay, where are we with what's coming in? How much have we invoiced? What's outstanding? And it's very important to track your expenses, because you spend $100 here, maybe this course, maybe that thing, then all of a sudden your expenses are way out of line. So that's another thing that I highly recommend as a resource. Along with that, I used a framework from Mike Michalowicz, Profit First. If you don't know the book, you need to get it. You need to read it. I go back and I look it up again because, one, you need to pay yourself first. Second, you need to make sure that you're allocating for taxes. You need to allocate for profit and without going a lot into that, but also your expenses. Keep your expenses in check. Yep. Otherwise you're going to be getting new this, new that. And many entrepreneurs and women in particular, they think, I made $100. Oh my God, I'm making $100. No, you're not. That's not a profit.
Yeah.
You need to pay yourself, and you need expenses. Your cell phone, your electricity. I mean, like your office. All of that is an expense, and you cannot have your expenses be greater than the amount of money you're coming in. So that's one of the resources that I would say definitely use, and find automations, right? Either do, delegate, delete, automate. These are the things, and there's so many different things. I would say for me, find, and there's no one size too.
Yeah.
I actually, one of the things that I give entrepreneurs is I have a list of all the resources I use, but I also have the comparable for email, right? I love Flowdesk. I know how to use MailChimp. I know how to use ConvertKit, but Flowdesk works best for me. It's easy, but I also know that I have some integrations on my website that sends emails, but for me, that's what I like to use. And I think that you need to also see what is the best fit for you, for where you are. And ultimately, the best tool to use is the one you're going to use. Because if you purchase something because somebody recommended it and you're not using it, then that's not a great tool.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I know we usually try to give a tip of a tool every single week in our newsletter, because it's the number one thing I always get asked, what tool should I use for this? Or how should I set up this automation? And I always suggest to people that if you're overwhelmed, you probably are not ready to necessarily set up an automation, but you can at least tell us the flow that you want, and then hire like a technical assistant for like 5 to 10 hours, let them knock it out one time, it's set up and you're done. And then you can keep going. And I think a lot of times people think that they have to hire or outsource for long term, like bring somebody on for a retainer. You don't have to do that. There are plenty of ways to outsource. You can do it here at Allobee, or plenty of other places where you can just get one quick thing done for what fits into your budget. And that can be like a game changer for your business by utilizing that, that tool or automation, for sure.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that you're saying that, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that.
They don't, and it can really save you so much time and energy, for sure. Well, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your book, Simple Habits, and then I want everybody to go out and get it. We'll make sure that we put it in the show notes, but give us a little bit of information about the book.
So, Brooke, I had not intended to do this, but definitely, if your listeners are interested, I would be happy to offer them a free version of the book. And I'll send you the link for them to download it. The main reason I wrote this book is because I am who I am, not because, all the greatness in me, but it's because of all the people that helped me. And my book is set up in a way in which I don't do anything unless, that's how it works for me. But I wanted to bring the stories of incredible individuals who have impacted me, who taught me and mentored me and helped me become who I am today. So there's mentors, there's friends, or my grandmother is in there. My late ex-mother-in-law is in there. And the reason that I wrote this is because you'll never get to meet my old boss, right? You won't, but she was successful, and the things that she did and she taught me are so great. And I wanted to share those lessons. So the book is divided into different chapters, different areas. And I highlight a confident dreamer, but someone who was also making an impact in the world with what they did. Someone that was very mission driven and was making their mark, but also had the tiny habits or simple habits that allow them to show up consistently. And they taught me these habits, and I help individuals not only read about them, but for each chapter, because the teacher in me needed to, create multiple modalities for you to grab the lesson. There's a journal too that you can actually download, and on the journal you can just, think about it, process it, but also decide, hey, I want to be good at goal setting. And this is how Melissa in chapter 6, who is a doctor and accomplished all these things, this is how she goal sets. After she goes after her dreams. And how did she do it? And now let's go to the next person. And then you figure out how to use that in your life. So that's how the book came about. It definitely Also, I wanted to create something that, you can identify and you can see yourself in some of the pages. And I share some of the stories of my clients as well, of people that I worked with, and some of the challenges that they've overcome and how they use some of these lessons, right? And how do they implement them and are growing in their life, and ultimately normalize that we don't live in this perfect Instagrammable life. We live in a messy, complicated, sometimes like, spin your wheels type of life. But the reality is that in the midst of all of that, when you have simple habits that can ground you, then no matter what blows up, then you can come back to that, right?
Yeah.
And you can come back and refocus and continue in that direction you want for your life and the freedom that you desire.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that is so true. And that freedom is so important and what so many people are really seeking. So maybe they're seeking flexibility, and maybe they are, but it's often very focused on that freedom element. Well, I have loved our conversation today, and I'm sure that we will have to have like a part two at some point in the near future. But I always ask every one of my guests. I think it fits very well for you, especially with your quote about action gives you traction. But how are you going to create momentum in the rest of 2022?
Oh my goodness. Okay, great question. Momentum is going to come from the planning. A lot of people say that, planning is so restrictive, but actually there's so much freedom in there. And for the rest of 2022, for me, I already started to hash out my fourth quarter plan. Today is the 31st. Since Monday, I've been reevaluating my month as well to make sure that I knew, what are my metrics. And then that's what drives. It's data driven work. I look at my data and that's what drives me ahead. And then planning it out. That's how I build the momentum, and that's how I'm going to be spending. I know I have my group coaching is opening up. So I want to make sure that, I'm reaching out and speaking to the people that have, told me that they want to work with me, and also providing them the tools that they need for that, and then planning into wrapping up the year.
I love that. Planning is so important. I always suggest doing quarterly planning and not just planning at the beginning or even just halfway through the year, because things change so rapidly as an entrepreneur, whether it is the macroeconomics that are changing in the world, or whether it is something in your own life, or just the fact that, things are not going the same way that you thought they were going to go. But just taking that time to reevaluate. Well, I'm sure that's going to give you lots of momentum, and I'm excited to see where everything with your business and the book goes. But thank you so much for being here today. And we will put in the show notes the link to that ebook. Thank you so much for offering that, as well as everywhere you can find Julie and keep up with her and connect with her. And if you feel like she might be a great coach for you, you can always reach out to her. So we'll put all of her information below. But thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Brooke. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to be able to support your community. You're doing some great work by the services that Allobee provides, and the partnership. You need the right person in your corner. And I believe you guys are making that space for others. So thank you again. And don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. Everybody listening, have a great day. And tune in next week for another episode with a wonderful entrepreneur that will help teach you more information about how to gain momentum in your business.